Welcome everyone, it's really nice to see so many people here interested in publishing. My name is Esther Kuforiji and I am the founder of the Jeli, which is a publishing company which I think just launched on Monday. It's a publishing company I call for Black millennials, thank you. And I say that we're trying to build a community of readers and writers in Africa and African diaspora, and we're having a lot of fun doing it so far. I actually suggested this panel to the team, and I think it's really important for us to have a panel on publishing, because I know there's a lot of people who are interested in reading, writing, but I'm sure that at a festival like this there's lots of potential publishers in the room, and it's something that we definitely need. So I'm really happy to be at this panel, and I should say actually my kind of inspiration for this actually came from Valerie, because Valerie spoke at Africa Writes 2 years ago, and that's one of the things that really made me believe that I could be a publisher, so it's really great to have her here. What I'm going to do to start off with is just let each of the panellists introduce themselves so that you can get to know them. So Valerie, if you kick off.
Hello everyone, my name is Valerie Brandis and I'm the founder of Jacaranda Books, launched in 2012 here in London. We are a traditional trade publishing company. We are focused on diversity in all its forms. Our sort of tagline is publishing as you know it, but with added colour. And yeah, that's what we do. We're a small group of 5, soon to be 4, unfortunately. And we are based here in London. We work very hard. And yeah, having fun doing it.
Hi, I'm Crystal Mahay Morgan. I've worked in publishing for maybe 8 years. I was 6 years at Penguin Random House, was really frustrated with the lack of diversity, the lack of forward thinking. Resigned one day to set up my own kind of venture, which is Own It. Own It's a storytelling lifestyle brand, so we don't describe ourselves as a publisher or a record label or a film company or a fashion label, but we do all of those things. So it's just about telling stories and finding the best way to communicate those stories.
Great.
Hi everyone, my name's Sharif. I work on the editorial team for Darf Publishers based here in London. We tend to work with translated fiction, which we've been doing for the past around 3 years. Before that, the house existed and published a lot of facsimile titles during the 80s that focused on travel literature from North Africa and the Middle East from the 18th to 20th century. But now the publishing house, we just work with translated fiction, a lot of it from North Africa, the Middle East, but now we're starting to expand into other areas too.
Great. So we're going to kick off looking at the relationship between editors and writers, and I think if there are lots of writers in the audience, one of the things that you're quite interested in is exactly what editors and publishing companies are looking for when they're looking for new work. But I think it's really interesting to also think about after they find out new work, what's the relationship between publishers and the writers that they take on. And I just wanted to bring in a quote from Ta-Nehisi Coates when he was talking about his working with his editor, and he said, "I wrote that book, but I could not have written that book alone. Somebody had to pull it out of me." So I was wondering if each of you could speak about that kind of pull and tug relationship, if it is that kind of relationship that you might have with writers. So start on this side.
Yeah, sure. For us, a lot of the relationships we have tend to be with the translators. We have a text that we believe in, that we found initially from another language, and then we have to establish a relationship with the translator. So for us, it's about getting a faithful translation from the translator, and that can be quite problematic at times. You know, there can be a lot of tugging at times, and there's been to different degrees with different projects that we've been on. Some have been easier than others. Some have required far more patience than others. But all in all, it's about maintaining a quality relationship throughout. I think you know, just having continuous communication with them, making sure that we're satisfied and also they're satisfied as well. And of course, all in all, remaining faithful to the original text. The actual relationship we have with the writers of the texts whose books we're publishing tends to be very positive. First of all, if somebody's written a book in another language, it's a privilege for us to approach them and say that we'd like to bring this to a larger audience. So yeah, we tend to have a positive overall experience with many glitches along the way.
Crystal?
So far so good, touch wood. So with Own It, we work with our writers in a very collaborative way, or all of our artists, and that's like from the business model right the way through to the creative process. So for example, at Own It, it's a 50-50 split between kind of all the art that's put out there with the artists and what Own It takes, and that kind of inspires a very creative, collaborative approach. So it's very much 50-50 into what you bring to the table. And one of the things I'm finding really liberating about having set up my own kind of smaller independent company is there's no longer this kind of needing to change things for diluted audiences, which I found quite a lot in the corporate kind of big publishing world. So for example, one of my authors, the next book it has loads of slang in it, and actually he took it to a bigger publishing house, and they said, right, no one's going to understand this, the mainstream audience won't get it, you need to take out all the slang. And actually I think it's really kind of nice that we can leave stuff in there which will appeal to a certain audience and it will resonate. So in terms of our working relationship, it's very, very collaborative.
Yeah. I think in relation to the quote, I didn't necessarily get attention there. I felt that he was being quite respectful toward the editor, and obviously when you're an editor, that's the dream, you know, that you find somebody to work with that actually appreciates all the time and the effort and hard work that you put into these lines and these individual words. Obviously that's my background, so I'm very close to that kind of relationship. And in Jacaranda, because we are looking for new voices, a lot of the manuscripts that we get are very raw, very untrammeled, if you like, and it's my job as the editor to kind of harness that and really kind of work with them through the process. And some people are wonderful in that process. They're open to it, they want to receive it, and other people just are not, and you just don't know why. I mean, it just makes no sense why you're going to argue with me over this one word. Why is it the way I said? It's a conundrum. You never know. Yeah. So that where the experience feels a bit like Ta-Nehisi's experience with his editor, it's a wonderful collaborative process. And when it feels like you're just up against it with somebody, it's very soul destroying, to say the least.
I feel like there's not a middle ground. Either I'm working with authors who lack confidence and who I have to constantly say to them, you're brilliant, your writing's amazing, your stories are appealing, you need to carry on. Or you get the other end of the spectrum where sometimes there's a little too much confidence. You're great, but...
Calm down, yeah.
So, just in that respect, what would be your kind of one key piece of advice for writers in terms of approaching you, or in terms of kind of the attribute that they should think about having as they work with publishing companies?
I think it's a really difficult question to answer because you're talking about people, you're talking about individuals, and you're talking about artists, and everybody approaches their art in a different way. So actually, you being the one constant, it's up to you to kind of look at each individual person and try and find a way in through them. And you can't always, but that's the objective, to try and find a way to reach them. And literally, I think Crystal was saying, just pull out the best or as the quote says, pull out the best that you think is in that book or in that manuscript. So I wouldn't say that there's one, everybody's different, that's the thing.
I think that's a trust. So the one thing you can do, and I think probably we all do, is try to build a relationship of trust. And I think if both the publisher and the author want the best for the project, then creative tension's really good. And when you don't always kind of have the same ideas or approach it in the same way, that's brilliant because you're going to get the best out of the project. So I think in order to get that, it's really a trusting relationship where everyone feels confident, you just want the best for the project.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's just you both want the same thing at the end of the line, so they have to be as open to suggestions and criticism, to make sure that can happen along the way, and that can be hard for some people. Like you said, you've got two on sides of the spectrum, and I think from my own experience, sometimes you've kind of had to deal with some egos along the way, and it's not so easy to get your point across that in order for this title to be published, we need to do these things. These are necessary things. And when it's your own work with anything, when you're editing or anything, you know, it's very hard for you to see the details in between that you're missing, and it does take other people to do that. And as publishers, that's what we do. You know, we want to bring out the best in these people, so they have to kind of accept that. You know, it's and then we can have a final product that we're happy with.
I have to say though, so having worked in kind of bigger publishing houses and more of a corporate kind of publishing world, the editors don't always know best, and especially when it comes to certain stories and certain voices, where when, you know, we all know publishing largely is white, it's middle class, the editors are all from a certain kind of small pool, and actually when you're talking about a diverse set of stories, sometimes those editors, I feel, do just need to trust the author to be able to tell their story and reach their audiences in the way that they know is best. So I think it's very different when you're talking about kind of independent setups and when you're talking about mainstream publishing.
Yeah.
That's interesting. So I wanted to move on to the whole issue of kind of readers, and you have this audience, so you're trying to reach this audience. And I came across another quote. I like quotes. It's going to be a theme. There was a set of podcasts from Oxford Brookes University, and one of the quotes that came out was, "Publishers used to be makers of books. Now they have to be makers of audiences." And obviously a lot of us are trying to reach very broad audiences, so how do you make that audience, how do you reach that audience as a publisher? And start with Crystal.
So I've kind of not just, so because I'm about stories and not just publishing, part of that kind of strategic method was because I want to reach audiences, and I think audiences engage with entertainment in different ways, so I'm not limiting myself to say a book audience or a music loving audience or a film audience, because actually I think there's so much crossover between those audiences. So I think part of building a relationship with audiences is thinking how audiences think, and actually not thinking in a very industry way, which is around departments or industries or books, or, you know, and just thinking around entertainment more generally. But I absolutely agree that it's not just about making books anymore or making records. It's about making entertainment or bringing stories that audiences are going to relate to. And I think digital is kind of a huge part in changing that landscape, because we can now have multimedia projects which kind of have different mediums all in one. So yeah, for Own It, it's very much about looking at the stories and the different ways we can bring those to a wide audience.
And again, for us at Jacaranda, I mean, we published 6 books last year, so for us, building that audience is very much, to use your word, a collaboration between us and our authors. So we ask our authors, once we've taken them on and we've gone through some part of the editorial process, to really be open with us and clear with us about who they think their market is and how they can help us reach the audience. And, you know, with that, then we can follow up with our publicity and our marketing and all of our market research. But it can't just be all on the publisher. Now you have the book, go off and sell it, you know, or create this audience for me. It has to be then that the author has a very clear idea of where they think the book will fit in the marketplace, and then we can help facilitate that. So it's a collaborative process at that stage.
Just interestingly, do you feel the relationship has changed? So is there more of an onus on the author nowadays, or has it stayed consistent?
Right. Well, I mean, we've only been doing it since 2012, but like I say, because we're working with very, you know, unpublished authors, new writing, we're kind of at that cusp where things have changed. So people are coming in, they've got their Instagram feeds, and they've got their blog posts and pages, and they have their Twitter, and they do have a really strong sense of who they are and where they want to reach. That's been our experience. So the audience that they want to reach. So it's about working with them to sort of develop that, you know. And it's ironic that comes in, but then the manuscript might have no, you know, commas everywhere and no formatting or no page numbers or basic stuff like that is kind of ignored, but they'll have, you know, put this Twitter followers, you know, put that out there. So yeah, we found it's been a very sort of interesting dynamic.
Yeah, it's interesting. Because the nature of our books, some of them coming from North Africa, the Middle East, they tend to have a niche audience, you know, because they are niche books in a sense, but for us, we don't want to really market them as niche books for a niche audience. We choose these books because we believe in them as a piece of literature, and I think we bring them because we think that they do have a wider appeal for people, which they might not necessarily have had before. So for us, it's important to to do our research into that, and it's like we were talking about before. It's all trial and error. And for when you're new to the game, it's and you're bringing books that might not necessarily fit into the market. It's very hard to establish an audience for that, but so we tend to try and focus on them as a piece of literature rather than a title from a particular country serving a particular purpose. That comes as well, but I think the focus is on the literature and to market it to people in order to expand for us and for the writer to give them more exposure to.
Great. My kind of next topic of focus is all around publishing and technology, and I really do feel having started Jeli this week, it would not have been possible maybe 10 years ago. It's technology that has made it possible for someone just to start a publishing company almost from nowhere. But I'm wondering, kind of for each of you, how technology has enabled you, and any changes that you have experienced in the time that you've been publishers that have been made by technology. So if we start here.
Yeah, I mean, like like you just said, I really don't think that I would be sat here today, even though we're still a new company. I don't really think we'd be sat here today if it wasn't for technology. You have this, you can reach bloggers and interact with your own customers, and you can hear what kind of feedback you receive instantly. Where that wasn't possible in the past. We've been given a new platform, with ebooks as well. That's a great way for us to sell books internationally, because when you're starting out, it's not so easy to distribute worldwide. It's not something that can just you can just get up and go and sell books all over the world. We have to establish a base here first. So ebooks has allowed us to distribute in that sense, and also for us as a publishing house, I think to kind of research other avenues and how we can make use of technology, which is something we're still learning, because it changes so much. It's all good to have a Twitter account, but to use that Twitter account effectively, which is difficult. I mean, all you have to do is look at your Twitter feed and see how witty and how most people are, and that's difficult because that's not really, it's a challenge for me. That but so it's you kind of have to keep up with the pace, and it's moving so quickly. Like a tweet could just disappear into nowhere, but. We try to make use as much as possible, and I think that it does definitely help us reach a wider audience, and also we can find our audiences through technology. Yeah, definitely.
Crystal?
I love technology. Sorry if anyone's heard me say this before, because I say it at every opportunity, but a couple of years ago the OECD published a report, and in the report they said the 16 to 24 demographic is the second least literate in the developed world, which I found quite shocking, especially someone who works with books. And that same report found that same demographic was one of the most tech savvy in the developed world. So to me, there's such an opportunity there. And I think when we talk about books and we talk about kind of publishing or any art form, our younger generations are so important. We all know knowledge is power, and more importantly, knowledge really empowers, and I feel sometimes younger generations need to feel empowered. So to me, technology is hugely important, because we know younger audiences particularly engage with technology. They kind of, whether it's music, games, apps, films, anything. Like, everyone has a smartphone, and on a smartphone you can read a book, you can watch a film, you can listen to music, and so that opens up whole new opportunities for us. And actually one of my first releases was a multimedia project, so It started off with a singer-songwriter. I saw a story within the song that he'd written. We recorded it with a singer. We got an animator involved. We got music producers involved. So it became a collaboration between all of these creatives. And then we published it in a multimedia digital book. So that brought different audiences to the form of a book, and it interacted kind of audiences who were into it for the single, they started reading the book. People that were into it for the book started listening to the music, and it kind of cross-pollinated platforms and audiences. So I think digital kind of just opens up endless possibilities for us. I'm a huge fan of it.
I hate technology. I mean, my idea of technology is my alarm clock in the morning.
I can't live without that.
But I think it's a small, relatively small word for a really huge, massive, complex thing. And it's not one size fits all. So for us as publishers, that's great for you, but that just wouldn't work for us at all. It's just not where our strengths lie or our interests. So we will develop a digital strategy. We publish all our books as ebooks. We have gotten a few of our authors via Twitter, just being online. And, we use it in different ways. Obviously, we will speak to people, publishers from all around the world and the continent via Skype, so it functions for me in a very different way. And that's the way it works for me, so just in a very sort of pragmatic, very practical way, rather than in terms of this big universe that we now occupy, where there's all these things coming at you at the speed of light.
I think it's been touched upon by all of you already, but kind of doubling down on social media specifically. I myself, and as you said, Valerie, find both readers and writers through social media, but it also is quite difficult to manage sometimes, as you said, because social media is not really about publishing content. It's about a conversation, and maintaining that conversation can be a challenge. So I'd just like you to speak about some of the opportunities and challenges of social media specifically. So,
well, it wasn't the end game. So the idea was we spoke to the guy, we spoke to our author, and then everything else became very physical and very analog in terms of the actual publication process. We sent them a contract and published a physical book. So it wasn't the end game, it was just the means to an end. Yeah. And for us, as I said, that's how it works. All of the sort of current, e-verse, if you like, works as in support of what we're doing, but it doesn't lead what we're doing in any way.
Okay.
So I probably don't tweet as much as I should, and that's just because I never seem to have the time to. But I think social media is brilliant in that it makes the world much smaller. So when you release a product, whatever it is, or you have a conversation or a dialogue, you can have that globally now within kind of your living room, which I really like about social media. And I also think there's a place for it in books. So when I was at Penguin Random House, I did a book with actually Hannah Knowles, the editors here, with Jamal Edwards, and we used social media as an integrated part of the actual book because we knew that would appeal to his audience. So his audience are quite young, he's really big on social media, so his audience. So we actually put a Twitter handle within the book, and we thought about social media when the book was being written, and that really helped and worked, and then that sparked conversations between them. So I think there's a huge place for social media in certain books and certain strategies. Of course, not all of them, but that's like anything. There's a place for vinyl and there's a place for music downloads. It's kind of horses for courses.
Yeah, social media, it helped us massively. Some of the books that we produced, they've come from countries like Libya and Yemen, and these are countries obviously that were involved with the Arab Spring, which was kind of, there was a huge buzz around social media from that, and I think we used that to our advantage because we were producing literature from these countries that, some of them have been under dictatorship for so long and had nothing coming out of them. We see some of our books as a sort of voice coming out of these countries, and social media was the perfect way for us to reach audiences, not only maybe diaspora or people like Arabists who are interested in the area, but other people started to become interested in literature from these countries, because it was so foreign, you know, and something that hasn't been done before. So I mean, that's where we initially started, is giving a voice to these countries, to an Anglophone audience, which social media facilitated massively. But with young people, I think it was interesting, like what you were saying, you know, people's attention spans now is, you know, it's very difficult to kind of grab attention. I mean, my sister said to me recently when I was going to show her a video, and she asked me, how long is it? I said, oh, it's 2 minutes. She said, I don't watch anything longer than 6 seconds, you know. It's a Vine or 140 characters, and that's it, you know. Anything else, it's like, it better be worth it, you know. So that's the difficulties with social media.
But they do read books, though.
They do, yeah.
She will sit down and read them.
She will, but I think that it's, with young people, like you were saying, you know, it's so difficult for young people to sit down and read books now, because there's too many distractions, you know. Right here in our phones, you know, I'm the worst for it, you know. I'm constantly
in a way,
distracted.
I think that's kind of exciting, because that changes our definition of what a book is, and actually, again, it just goes back to the stories. Kind of before we had a physical book, we were telling stories through oral traditions and rhyme and rhythm, and, you know, in a way, the actual physical book was a revolutionary thing, and it was something that was so I think, you know, if we can use social media to engage different audiences, and if we can kind of redefine what a book is even, and have kind of, why can't we write a book through like 140 characters and Twitter, and at the end of the day, if it's conveying a story and it's resonating with people and changing lives, then that's a good thing, kind of however we come about it.
Yeah, definitely. It doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, a negative thing, and, you know, like own it, you know, doing kind of using that's fantastic. That's what social media should be for, rather than, you know, being just something that you scroll through for hours a day. You know, it should be something productive, and, you know, that is in a sense revolutionary. What you're doing is kind of, changing the face of social media. It's what it's there for, I think.
And books as well.
Exactly.
I think books also, sometimes when I speak to young people, or I work with authors who kind of don't see themselves traditionally as authors, there's this thing around books that they're elitist, or they're not for some people, or they're not as accessible as they should be, and a lot of that does come down to represent books. I think a lot of that does come down to representation. A friend of mine's a teacher, and he was in Tower Hamlets, where, you know, it's mainly kind of, well, there's a whole mix of kind of young children there, but mainly non-white, I suppose. And they all wrote a story, and one of them had a character who had a Muslim name, and another child said to that child, I think they're 7, 8, you can't have that. We're writing books. Why have you put a Muslim name in your kind of book? And I think that's really sad, but that's what they see. Representation's kind of really important. And I think things like social media, which is an everyday thing, opens it up more and makes things more accessible to people.
And I think that's great, because one of the things we're doing at the Jeli is we have our Instagram feed, and underneath the pictures that we put up, we'll put short poems or short stories, and it's a way to get people who might not pick up a book reading stories, reading narratives. So yeah, I'm very passionate about that particular aspect. Now, just moving on to kind of what I'm saying is about literature and the influence of everything that you guys are doing on culture and on society. And I read a piece of academic research that said after children read Harry Potter, they become less prejudiced. They learn about not stereotyping people from the way that the wizards treat muggles. So I was just wondering about how you feel about kind of your influence as a publisher, about what impact what you're creating and what you're helping your authors create can have on the wider world. So Valerie, you start.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's fundamental to what we do, because obviously representation, if you're not seeing yourself in a text, or you're not seeing yourself in an advert, or you're not hearing your stories being told, you do feel invisible in this culture. So, for example, we published a book by Frances Mensah-Williams. The book is called From Pasta to Bigfoot. It is very commercial women's fiction about a young woman growing up in Hampstead and then going back to Ghana. So it's, to all intents and purposes, a very middle-class story. And Frances had the hardest time convincing anybody that this was a view of A, black people in the UK, and B, Africans, this middle class lifestyle just didn't exist, So she was really struggling. When she came to us, she was very frustrated. We published the book, we kept the title, and we had to fight in order to get that title accepted by our sales and distribution, because they're like, no one will understand it. They won't know what that means, So we felt that it was really important to keep the work as it was and to put it out there and to believe that, we're in the 21st century and people can read and they will understand it, we're not the gatekeepers for that kind of knowledge any longer. So I think it's a very, very important role that a publisher takes on, and we do take it seriously. But we are, we're a very commercial, mainstream publishing company. That's what we do.
So in a way, I'm kind of fed up of talking about diversity. Like, why don't we talk about universality? And I think that's kind of what you're talking about. We can all relate to certain universal human themes. And I think sometimes the norm, the default is kind of white, straight, often male. And kind of the further away you get from that, the harder it is to see that people who create that art as universal. And I think actually, if you've got something that's written by kind of a black female lesbian, that doesn't mean that what she's writing will only appeal to black female lesbians. We all have such a wide spectrum of human emotions, and I think that's what we need to get past, kind of thinking of certain writing as niche or certain, I read things and watch things by white authors, white directors, male kind of authors and musicians, and it appeals to me, it resonates with me. But sometimes when it's the other way around and you've got something other doing it, we tend to think it can only appeal to people that look like them or talk like them, and I think we need to kind of get past that, and I think that's what that kind of shows in a way.
Yeah, definitely following on from that, it's like I was saying earlier, our books, they are niche, but we see it as our responsibility to making those available to a wider audience. We don't want them to come across as a niche book for a specific person. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to bring world literature to people, to open doors for them, to kind of give a different perspective, and this kind of the way that literature can influence that, I think, is massive. And in the past few years, things have changed massively in the Arab world, and 3 of our books have come from or about Libya. 2 of them are from Libya. One is from a Libyan author, Alessandro Spina, The Confines of the Shadow, which was written in Italian. That was written, it's a huge epic book which we're releasing over 3 volumes. But this huge piece of literature, it tells us the 20th century story of Benghazi, which is this is a city that not many people know much about, but it has a hell of a history, and we want to kind of bring that to a wider audience. We don't just want it to be kind of forgotten about or anything. We see it as an important role, bringing that into the English language and to a wider audience. So yeah, I think literature massively shapes people's perceptions of certain places, and especially if a country has nothing but connotations of dictatorship and being closed off. I think I have a lot of respect for my director who started the company in order to give a voice to these people. It's I think it's a very gutsy move, and I hope it pays off.
Okay. So I think this is probably the perfect time to open up for questions. If you have one, there's a roving mic just over there, so put up your hand and the mic will come to you.
I have 2 questions, if that's okay. Okay, my first one is, I'm Crystal, I'm a writer as well, and I'm basically wondering, you guys are all like more traditional publishers as opposed to like self-publishing or hybrid publishing. Like, why would you Like, why would you recommend that as writers we pursue traditional publishing? And do you want my second question now? Or?
Yeah, go on.
Okay, my second question is that as publishers that focus on like underrepresented groups, do you feel obliged to take on every work you receive because we are so underrepresented, or are you still like very selective about the work you choose?
Okay, if you kick off, Valerie.
Well, the first question was, why would a self-published author go to a traditional house?
Just why would you recommend that we pursue traditional publishing methods?
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. The thing is, you have to figure out for yourself as an artist what will work for you. There are some authors that do extremely well as self-published authors. What they have done is they've educated themselves about the industry and how it works, and they know how to basically work the system to make it benefit themselves. And then there are others who might be great in terms of writing a manuscript, but they're not good at self-promotion. They don't necessarily know where they want their books to be sold into. There's a big conversation that an agent and B, a publisher in the traditional model can offer. You know, so I think one of the things is, I think that authors really need to kind of up their game as well and sort of meet publishers halfway a little bit, because I think that we've got a lot of onus on the publisher to sort of wave a magic wand and create this career, when actually things are very difficult and very hard out there. And it has to be more of a, on a par, the relationship.
Yeah, I'd second that. I think it's not necessarily the right thing to go with traditional publishing in any kind of sense of the word traditional publishing. It's kind of, you have to do what's right for you. I think what sometimes publishers do bring is relationships, so like you might get better distribution than if you're a self-published author. So if kind of having your books in shops, traditional shops and things like that are important to you, it's easier to get those things to happen when you are with kind of a traditional publisher, but you really have to do what's right for you.
Yeah, there are a lot of avenues to explore now, more so today than ever before. So I think it's important to kind of look what is best for you, you know, and what you're trying to convey with your writing. There's no harm in trying to pursue the traditional method, but I wouldn't put all your eggs in one basket. It's better to kind of just explore, because there is so much out there to explore as well for a writer. It's quite exciting, really. So I think that you should take advantage of that fully.
And the second question was, do you feel obliged to publish everything you get because you're trying to improve things?
I mean, short answer is no.
Yeah, no.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it's really important that when we do talk about underrepresented writers, we don't let the bar drop. Like, it has to be of the highest standard. It can't be published because it's from an underrepresented writer. And the truth is, there are enough very talented underrepresented writers that we don't need to ever drop the bar.
Yeah. And just to add, I know when I get submissions, even if I reject the actual piece of work, I will always give feedback.
Yeah.
And I'm very passionate about developing writers. So even if I don't publish you today, I want you to be a better writer because you've had that interaction with me. So yes, it's really important. Any other questions? Someone in the back there.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Masunde. I'm the founder of Black Pen Writers. We're the only writing group for African and Caribbean women in the UK. So I have a question for all of you. I'm sorry, I'm not sure what your name is, but the lady from Jacaranda?
Yeah, Valerie.
Valerie, hi. You mentioned a book. I think the title was From Pasta to Pig Book, which I think is a great title.
It's not mine, but I agree.
And you mentioned some of the obstacles that there were for you as a publisher in terms of getting that book published. And I found that, I thought that was really interesting, because I've heard, I think, a lot about the obstacles that writers will have in terms of getting publishers to even consider their work. So maybe asking them to change the ethnicity or the gender or the sexuality or the religion or the geographical location of their characters. So I'd just like to find out about kind of gatekeepers. Who are those gatekeepers for all of you as publishers you know, what sort of obstacles have you had? And specifically in relation to that book, how did you get over those obstacles? And are there any ways in which authors can help you as publishers in terms of getting those books out there and just getting past gatekeepers who are trying to obstruct creativity?
That's about 15 questions. No, but well, initially when I founded Jacaranda and I went to London Book Fair, the first year I went to London Book Fair, and I met with a couple of American agents, and the first lady that I met with, the minute I sat down, she said, "Oh, you're that black publisher." She's doing this with her hand as if to say, "This is where you stay," and there you are. And that was the challenge that we had with Jacaranda from the very beginning, is to get people to, yes, I'm a black woman, I love being a black woman, but there's things that I do and think and like and care about that go beyond that scope. And where we were really challenged with it was with our sales and distribution. The first company that we were with, they were selling, when we went to meet them, they were like, "Oh yeah, great, yeah, come on board." But little did we know, they had us in their minds as a very successful black publishing company that used to exist in the UK, that I'm not sure what's happening with them now, but they're called Express. And amongst other things, they publish Baby Mama, yeah? So they decided that that's who we were. Just because we share melanin, you know, but we have it in common. And, you know, for better or for worse, you know, that's not my background. It's not the background of any of the staff that work with us, and it's not our interest either, you know. So we were having to then, it's particularly with From Pasta to Pigfoot, go in and explain not only where we were coming from, but where this author was coming from, who's a businesswoman, runs her own company, wants to write romance novels, that's what she wants to do, and has a very particular mindset. We had to literally convince them that this is who she were, and we were very fortunate in being able to do that. So in the end, what happened with From Pasta to Pigfoot is that we got a W.H. Smith promotion for it, that meant the book was nationwide, W.H. Smith travel, so all the travel outlets, the airports, rail stations, what have you, which gave that book huge visibility, and gave the very title that they said would not sell huge visibility. And I mean, we had people like, there was this one woman, she picked it up at the airport, and she sent us a picture from the airplane. She's like, "Oh my God, I love this book." She was going back to America and saying, "Oh, I'm going to start a reading group, I love it so much." So that was what the benefit of that for us, but it definitely was a challenge and a struggle.
I think, so for a lot, like I said, I worked in kind of mainstream publishing, and for a long time I was really frustrated. Glass ceilings, how do I get the gates to open, how do I break them down, all of that. And then I kind of realised, and this is what Bearlit has done within itself, that it's not about worrying about the gatekeepers. Let's build our own gates and keep them open for people who want to come through. And I think sometimes so much energy is wasted in trying to conform and fit in and make a change within a world that isn't going to change because we're banging on doors. It needs to change because they're opening doors. They need to change it from within. You know, there's only so much you can do from the outside, but what you can do is create something of your own. And actually when you do that and you do it successfully, those same people come knocking. And I think, you know, we're not all one homogenized group just because we've got things in common, even if that's a struggle. And actually you mentioned Express there. The next book I'm publishing with Robin Travis, his first book was published by Dotham at Express, and his next book we're publishing. So, you know, there needs to be kind of diversity even within diversity. We've got such an undiverse kind of definition of what diversity is, and I think mainly we just need to forget about the gatekeepers because they're not thinking about us. Let's just do our own thing and do it well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's very hard to follow up. But I agree with everything you say. You know, it is a huge challenge out there, but it's about us kind of stepping up and pursuing what we feel passionate about. You know, and if that's with the difficulties we face trying to get into the mainstream, you know, then we have to look at other avenues, and we have to, if we truly believe in something, we have to put all our passion into that and look at how we can reach, you know, the general audience through other means, because they are out there. It's just a case of finding them. We are still finding them, definitely, you know, but I think if it didn't feel like that, then we would have given up a long time ago. But we do know that it's hard to crack. But you know, you do have to create your own direction, and it's not easy to do that. But eventually it comes, I think, if you have enough passion and drive behind it.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's Toni Morrison that said if there's a story that you want to read that isn't out there, write your own. And I think it's the same across the publishing industry.
Exactly.
If there's something, if you can't find any black agents, become one, or encourage your friends to become them. If you can't get published, start a publishing company. Any more questions?
Hello, I'm a bit late, so I'm sorry if this has already been covered, but I wondered if we could talk a little bit about authors' earnings. So there was a piece of research from the LCS that came out and said, you know, authors' earnings are now at 11 grand, which is 5 grand below what anyone considers livable on. And we talked a bit about submissions and, you know, needing people to keep writing these books. Do you have any kind of thoughts about that, or advice, or ideas about what publishers can do to pull authors' earnings back up a bit?
Again, it's one of those, seems like a very small, simple question. I know it's out here. I mean, it's linked to lots and lots and lots of different things. You know, as a very small publishing company, you're not coming to us to make any money. That's just the bottom line of it. You know, all the risk is mine or ours. You know, we pay for the small advance, we pay for the books we produce, we pay for marketing and publicity, and we hope that we can sell it. But we don't have the economies of scale of, say, a Penguin Random House or a HarperCollins, whereby you might be a first-time novelist and come in and sell 10,000 copies or 50 or 20, although now these numbers are even hard for them to reach, you know. So there's a guy called Scott Pack, I think his name is, and I went to an event with him, and he was breaking down the reality of author earnings and advances. And he looked at one of these huge crime writers, you know, who sells millions of copies and got $1 million advance, and it took him 25 years to start making money on his royalties. It just is not. So from where we sit at the moment, I can't tell you in terms of authors' earnings. When you come to a small house like Jacaranda, you're coming for other reasons besides wanting to make a living at it. That's what I think.
So I took a very conscious decision to split all profits 50-50 between Own It and the authors or artists or whatever kind of creative I'm working with. And it goes back to the collaborative approach. I feel that I bring something, the creative brings something. Without either of us, it wouldn't happen the way it happens and get kind of any light that hopefully it will get. And so for me, it's just important to split it 50-50. I think, yes, I'm putting the money up front and kind of all the time and resource, but equally authors, they spend a lot of time kind of putting time and effort into the writing, and I felt like they really needed to be rewarded equally as I was. So it's not for everyone, but for me it was a very conscious decision, and hope they feel rewarded for that. It kind of changes the dynamic as well, because it's then not a publisher and an author, it's two creatives coming together to bring art out into the world, and if it goes successfully, we both benefit from it equally.
I think it's just quite important for writers to make informed decisions. So I think definitely educating yourself about exactly what the state of the industry is and what people are earning, because as much as you say that in regards to writers' earnings, I know criminal barristers who are pretty much in the same situation. So it is about, if you have this passion, if this is the career you're pursuing, just make sure you know what you're getting yourself into and see how you can make your way through.
Yeah, it's very ambitious for a writer to have their job title as author, because especially if you're pursuing small publishing houses, they just don't have the money to provide to have a salary above, like if they're earning £11,000, it's very difficult for people to earn a living from that. But from what Crystal was saying, there has to be a respect between the publisher and the author, and we want to do the best for them, and we can only provide so much, and hope that the book sells. And obviously we do see it as fair as giving them what they deserve, but we have to put it in ourselves to do that, and so I don't think they can really work on that sort of salary basis. You know, if you're working with independent publishers, it's very difficult. Yeah.
Any more questions? I think I saw one at the back. Okay, so the lady on that side.
Thanks. My question is similar to the one about the writers and the money, but it's also about the issue of over-publishing, as it's sometimes called, whereby there are so many books that even the most avid reader, someone reading, I don't know, 24 books a year, which is up there, is struggling to read all the books that they want to read. And then given that we're sort of becoming slightly more visual as in terms of how we absorb culture than words, more pictures than words, how does that affect how you sell your books, or how does that affect how you sell your books? And does that bother you? I'm actually very encouraged that you're all confident about finding markets for books and so forth, but does the issue of over-publishing in this region in particular affect you at all?
I mean, I think for us, each book is a little entity and market of its own, isn't it? So you sort of delve into that and figure out how you can best promote and sell and get the best for the author per title. And you really can't afford to think about the massive number of books that are being published, because then you would just not get out of bed in the morning. You sort of still have to believe in what you're doing, that you are helping somebody and you're trying to make a difference and you're trying to add to the cultural fabric of, especially here in the UK. And so that's how you do it. You know, you get up and we look at our books like Butterfly Fish. We're not going to sell it in the same way as we sold in Past the Pigford or for Tram 83, which is a book in translation. So each of our books are very unique, separate entities, and we kind of approach them that way.
So yeah, it's a real problem, discoverability. Sorry to use that kind of publishing buzzword, but it is a real problem. I suppose Own-It's approach has been not to limit ourselves just to books, but to think about stories. And then actually it's not just about competing with hundreds of books, there's other ways to reach our audience. So like I say, Don't Be Alien, it was an animated multimedia book with a song in it, and some people came to the book because they bought the single from iTunes and they came to it through the song. Other people bought the book because they saw the animation and they came to it through that way. So again, I think it's not, for Own-It, it's not just about thinking of books or physical books or digital books, but thinking about the way audiences engage with entertainment and consume entertainment, and then us changing the way we bring stuff to market to fit audiences.
I'll just kind of add in that I definitely feel like kind of your question has been at the forefront of my mind with the Jeli, and that's part of the reason why we've started kind of selling individual short stories, because it's kind of a more manageable form for people to read on a regular basis. And one of the things we're hoping to experiment with in the future is serialization. So it's all about finding how you can deliver great narratives to people in ways that they can manage rather than overloading them. So
yeah, our office is based below a bookshop in West Hampstead, so you can imagine just going up to the ground floor is very overwhelming when you look at the shelves and all the new releases, and you know how quick that changes, you know. So, but rather than being intimidated by that, I think it's important to see yourself as contributing to this growing literary landscape. And because of the nature of the books that we produce, I think we feel proud that our books can make it onto the shelves alongside these other titles, and rather than kind of seen as being shunned out by them, as kind of being a contributor as well. So that's an important thing for us, because if you look at it the other way, then obviously, like you said, it'd just be impossible to get out of bed in the morning and have the motivation to do anything.
And we feel the same way about our books, that we're proud to see them on the shelves.
Exactly, yeah.
Thank you.
question this there?
Hi, what kind of advice do you wish that you'd been given when you first started out as publishers?
That's an interesting question. I think maybe at the beginning we were a bit more, we followed our hearts more than our heads, if that makes sense. We tended to pursue books that we were very passionate about, that may not have been a commercial success, but we're still very proud of putting them out there. But I think that unfortunately it is a business at the same time, and in order for us to keep moving and producing books, we have to kind of head in us, we have to kind of look at the directions we're heading in. We only choose books that we're passionate about, but I think it's the selection process is something that requires a lot of attention, and we're improving all the time, and we're selecting books that we still feel passionate about, and I think that'd definitely be something I would have told myself a couple of years ago.
So only it's still quite kind of new, so it's hard to answer that, but I can answer in terms of what I wish people had said to me when I was starting out in publishing generally and forging a career in publishing. And I wish people told me that it's them and not you, because for a long time I thought, when I went to interviews when I was first starting out, like people would say you speak with a very London accent, like you're not going to progress very far in publishing, you should think about the way you articulate yourself, which is kind of mad. You're not going to go to France and say to someone who wants to work, you've got a very French accent. I mean, we're in London, but so I spent a lot of time like feeling like, well, why aren't my ideas being taken seriously? Why aren't these things happening for me when I know that I have the talent and I'm proving myself continuously? And I think it would be that actually there are certain barriers that exist if you're working class, if you're come from a certain background, if you have a London accent apparently, but I think it's just, and if there is anyone who wants to get into publishing, like, don't let anyone make you feel that it's not for you, or you don't belong, or your ideas aren't good enough. And I think, it's them, not you.
I don't know in terms of advice. I remember when I was starting up and I was telling people that what I was doing, I mean, time and time again, people would say to me, "Oh, you're brave. You're so brave." And I'm just like, is that code for like stupid or something? So it used to make me very nervous, but I kind of stuck with it. I don't know, you really don't know what you don't know. And you're just kind of learning as you go along, and it's painful and it's hard and it's difficult. And it's also a lot of fun as well, and you meet a lot of really interesting people, and you get to work on amazing books with amazing authors. So, I mean, I would say just do it if you can. Just do it.
Any other questions? Okay, one down here.
Hi, I'd like to ask the panel, it was nice to hear a mention of The Express actually, because I read their books when I was a teenager, and it was the first time I thought, well, we could tell our own stories. And I would like to know what happened to those guys and what happened to that house, but can I ask the panel, what publishers have been inspirational to you in getting into the business, and just for your lives as well? So that's my question.
I mean, I was very fortunate in the sense that I got to work for what I considered to be my dream publisher, which was Profile Books and Serpent's Tail. And I was a huge fan of Serpent's Tail because they published a lot of black authors and people like George Pelicano, so just really great writers, and Pete Ayrton, who I was able to work with for a little bit, was just a very inspirational person to me. He started out in Finsbury Park. I'm a North Londoner, and it felt accessible and close. So I was very fortunate to be able to work there, and they still remain, high on my list of people that I respect. And of course, for me, growing up in the UK, people like Rosemary of Hope Road, Tamarind Books, Werner Wilkins, the Huntleys, Bogle Overture, all these old traditional black publishing companies that I saw, intermittently growing up, that influenced me and really made me want to try and do it myself.
Yeah, I mean, many of the same, and I think for anyone, kind of, for all of us, it's probably the same publishers. There are a few kind of really pioneering ones. By the way, Express are still about. Dotham's still doing stuff, and yeah, his last book was with Robin Travis, Prisoner to the Street. So, but I think also it wasn't just publishers that inspired me. It was writers, creatives. It was just that thing of wanting to tell stories and bring stories to market, and especially when I was seeing kind of from mainstream publishing that so many stories weren't being brought to market, I think it's that which really inspired me to want to do it myself and give a platform to kind of a wider range of people.
And as I said at the beginning, Valerie and also Bibi Bakare Yusuf of Cassava Republic Press was really inspirational to me. But as Crystal said just now, it's beyond kind of book publishing. One of the really influential brands for me is ID magazine. I get so much inspiration just looking through the magazine, and I really want to just catch a bit of that kind of personality in a brand in what I'm building as well. So
yeah, I think, well, for me personally, I got into publishing through discovering Darf, because I had a lot of admiration for what Ghassan, the director, was doing. So I kind of, just the small publishers who are giving people voices, been very inspirational to me over the last couple of years, because it's a new thing for me too. So I think with technology and everything, I've been able to come across a lot of new publishers, and following them has been very inspirational, definitely, seeing the different avenues everybody's taken, for sure. I like the direction it's heading.
Good stuff. So I think that brings us to an end. Thank you everyone for coming to this panel and for all of the questions.